Use the option to leave the meeting. I'm going to be sure I don't do that. It's interesting if so. Let's see. Oh, whoops. I just realized I mistyped that. Sorry about that, guys. It's Nathan B. I don't pay, have not paid for the Full Everywhere memberships. I don't have a custom URL, which makes this more interesting. Trying that again with the correct one in there. And of course, I made that mistake there as well, which is fun. It's a good reminder, but you're not that smart. I'm going to go ahead and jump in if looks like we got most people here and not nobody else coming in. So
Yep, sounds good. Have at it.
So folks, thanks for joining. I wanted to talk a little bit. We working in kind of the online field, I think we're lucky in a way that there are reports that come out constantly. There was literally one out just a couple of days ago looking at online learning from Insights EDU. There's kind of regular ones that come out from Wiley. The Chloe report is coming out this June for this year. Chloe, I think it's 8 this year. We have a huge amount of data that comes out every single year about this population. And I think that even beyond that, the population is shifting on a pretty regular basis. What things looked like just a few years ago is already changing quite a bit. And of course, the pandemic has had a huge effect on that. So I thought I might share some of kind of what has happened in the last couple of years, some things that I found particularly interesting with data that's coming out from some of these reports. I do have a poll everywhere up, and if you guys could fill it out, I would greatly appreciate it. It just kind of is getting a sense of what you think the data would show. And then we can kind of see how that compares to what the data actually shows from these reports. Just quickly introducing myself, I'm Nathan Bullock. I've been in adult, professional, non-traditional kind of online learning my entire career. Currently executive director for online operations at UCCS, and trying to kind of grow our online programs here. I actually just not too long ago finished my doctorate in learning sciences, and specifically focused on working with faculty to develop strong online programs. So it's something I think I have quite a bit of passion about, and hopefully can translate that a little bit to what some of you guys with this information today. Like I said, if you can fill out the poll, I would appreciate it. I made a typo on this, of course. So it's Nathan B375, not just Nathan. So that's what I get for not paying for the membership, I suppose. Looks like we've got a couple of surveys completed, so thanks for those of you who are putting it in. Just a couple of quick things to start. I've got slides posted to the Discord channel, so don't worry about taking notes or anything. You can download those there. I do have a reference slide at the end of the deck with data sources that you can look up. I'm also happy, I can put this into a share file if anybody wants to email me, and I can kind of email you a link so you can download these directly instead of having to go and kind of fill out the forms and everything and download them in different places. And please feel free to jump in on the chat or verbally. I'd love to hear if the data that you're seeing is kind of surprising, if it reflects what you're seeing on your campuses, if there's kind of information from your side that would kind of further fill out what's going on with some of this data. So with that said, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the online learning landscape in general. And to start, I'd asked approximately how much has online learning enrollment grown since 2016. So it looks like about half of the respondents so far are saying 127%, and then a few people thinking that it's either 338 or 874. Nobody going with 38%. So I guess that we're aware enough in the field that's probably not where it's at. So this shows the increase in registered online learners. And this looks at all online learning, so it's not exclusive to just fully online students. It's about a 338% growth since 2016, which is almost just staggering when you think about it, really. But obviously, you see the huge jump from 2019 to 2020, and that massive amount of increase that happened kind of as a result of the pandemic, and then kind of the after effects of that. We were already on a pretty high trajectory here. But this has obviously shifted it upwards. I didn't manage to find data from the past year too well yet, but I'm pretty sure we'll still see it back, on up here. It's definitely on a growth trajectory. Okay, so what percentage of online students are first generation? We actually got pretty close on this. So most people went with 35%, some 46%, and then a few 57%. If we slide over, I don't know why this is not letting me click this very easily. There we go. From a report that just came out actually a few weeks ago from Inside CDU, that's about 35% in the survey that they did that are the first in their family to attend college. And I'll be honest with you, this was actually a little higher than I thought it might be. I think that's been climbing a little bit in recent years. I think for a long time, first generation students did kind of tend to go to campus more because of the support options. But just as online grows, we're seeing growth in kind of every segment across that. I saw earlier today, I don't know if anybody attended, I didn't manage to get into it, but there was a session talking specifically about first generation in online. And if anybody has comments either from that or from their own campuses, I'd love to hear if you're doing anything specifically for first generation students that are fully online students. It's a pretty significant number of the population that we're looking at that is in that category. And I really think that kind of raises some questions for us about what we're doing to support that. Are there ways we should support it differently? I know that first generation gets talked about a lot, but most of the conversations I hear about it are for the main campus and kind of first year on campus perspective, not necessarily for the online perspective. So I think it's at least interesting and something for us to ponder is like how we can be able to reach that population to kind of assist them And like I said, if anybody has things that you're doing, I'd love to hear that too. Proximity still matters. I think for a lot of us, we probably know this, but 80%, 4 out of 5, live within about 100 miles of a campus they attend. That is looking at all campuses. It's not looking just at the main campus. So if they have a location somewhere else or something, it's floating that into it as well. But there's still a strong level to which students are looking for something kind of close by. I would imagine there's a number of different reasons for that. I mean, just familiarity, things along those are a part of it. I know that we talk a lot about as well about just kind of them having feeling like they can go to campus if they need to. I would also imagine the alumni networks, things like that, are having an impact on that population kind of wanting to. I mean, obviously, if you're wanting to stay in the Denver area, there's probably a better chance that you're going to have a strong alumni network and your career services network in Denver, as opposed to if you were to go with like Miami University out of Ohio or something like that for the local area. Career motivation, I think we all know, is probably key for this. 46% say they want to advance their current career. So that a lot of them are trying to stay in their career, just kind of move up. And then just looking broadly at like all higher education students, about 32% right now, almost a third, are taking at least one online course. And I think from a lot of our campuses, we probably know that a lot of them are taking more than that, or taking a couple or three. All right, what percentage of online learners have no children? I was hoping this might trip us up a little bit, actually, because I found this surprising. So it looks like we went heavily with just 17% of online learners have no children. I don't know why it's not letting me advance this. That's a little bit off. It's actually 57%, according to an Inside CDU poll that came out just about a month or so ago. The stereotype, I think we've probably all heard at some point or another, is kind of the stay-at-home mom population, are the ones that are doing degree completion. And I think increasingly that is just absolutely not the case. It is a wrong stereotype. And I think that we have all got to start like kind of getting on board with the change in this, because it's really going to start to have an impact, I believe, on our enrollments and things if we don't know who kind of the population is. Again, this is from Inside CDU. I forget the exact name. It's listed in the slide deck. But a poll they put out about a month ago says about 43% are age 25 or younger. And that alone is a huge shift from just a few years ago. I mean, that age, the average age, the median age, have been trending down for years now. So a huge amount of students are basically living at home, not moving to campus, saving the room and board kind of money, and are choosing to do an online program while living with their parents or something like that. And it's bringing that online age down quite a bit. 60% are single. So once again, definitely not kind of the stay-at-home mom stereotype. 50%, 7% no children, and then about 59% are employed full-time, which is actually a little lower than it has been in the past. But again, as it trends lower, you've got more students that are living with mom and dad, that are taking a couple classes online, that are working part-time, but maybe you're not working full-time yet. All right, how many fully online programs do public universities have on average? So it looks like we went mostly with about 6, and then people saying about 32, or then going down 20 and 41. So this was from an AASCU survey last year that said on average, most public universities have 20 fully online programs. Now, this obviously comes with the caveat that it's an average. They did the average instead of the median. Obviously, there's some outliers like Arizona State, Penn State, other really big publics that are out there that have a lot more fully online programs. So it's it probably drags the average up a little bit. If you look at the median, my guess would be it'd be a little bit lower than this. But with that said, there's 20 is the average, like across that survey. 94% of public institutions reported that they're offering online programs. I suspect in the very near future, that'll be virtually 100%. I mean, with a few exceptions for either very specialized institutions or institutions that, for whatever reason, think that they just don't need to do online. Hybrid programs, about 16 on average. And then institutions offering more than 30 online programs is about 1 in 5. So again, that's kind of the outliers that are going to have like a much bigger population that maybe drag up the average a tiny bit. Looks like David asks, this is undergraduate or graduate. It's actually a mix. I've pulled data from a few different sources, so it's a mix of generally the overall online population, undergraduate and graduate, across it. Something I think just kind of interesting for us to think about in terms of the market that we're looking at for this. Group of people out there that are SCNC, if you don't know the acronym, some college no degree, or I'm sorry, SCND, I think made a typo there. But people basically that have not completed a degree but have started. There's a pretty significant population in areas that I think we would probably want to kind of target in many cases, the 25 to 34 demographic, 35 to 44, some pretty large percentages that have some college have not completed a degree yet. So I think it's something for us to keep in mind as we do marketing, as we look at working with students, as we try to reach out to kind of look for those populations. I will note this population, they the way they did this data, they looked at, you had to be out for I think a year, so that most students that are under 25, they're still enrolled or they were recently enrolled. So it kind of has that a little bit smaller. There's certainly some students that have dropped out that are under that age. But because people kind of come and go, they didn't really want to inflate that, I think. So what social media platform do you use on a near daily basis? It looks like Instagram. I was kind of expecting Facebook to come to a little bit higher up on this. But Instagram, TikTok, Twitter is what at least we're on. Looking at what the student population is on, though, is a very different look from what we're on. And I think it's something for us to all keep in mind in terms of just what's happening in the classroom or what's happening behind the classroom in the students' free time. This is frequency of social media usage, and then looking at daily, weekly, monthly, less than once a month. If you've paid any attention the last few years, even to Congress, the last couple of weeks or so, TikTok is a big topic out there. There's a lot of discussion about it in a lot of different places. I think just today I saw that Florida just banned it from all Florida State University campuses. So it's kind of a hot topic, but it's also a hot social media engine at the moment, with about 77% of students in the survey that Insights EDU did saying that they're using it daily. Facebook, I'm actually a little surprised, honestly, that 76%, given that it's trending a little younger these days. And I think that younger people are, for the most part, not using Facebook nearly as much as those of us who are a little on the older side. Instagram, we saw that with our group here, is a lot of people are using that pretty regularly. And I think that's, that's kind of, Instagram is one that is kind of somewhat cross generational. Everybody's using it a little bit. Snapchat, I would be willing to bet that the vast majority of us don't use Snapchat that often. And even if we have an account, we probably don't use it that terribly often. It's definitely kind of a younger generation that's usually on it. Twitter, I'm a little surprised too that there was 58% saying they had full or daily use there. I kind of thought that was honestly a little older and a little more professional maybe than some of the student populations that we're working with, but it looks like there's a pretty good number using that. We're on Discord for this. I'm going to be honest with you, I struggle with Discord. I feel like it's a sign of old age that I have a harder and harder time figuring out how to use technology and things like that. And I feel like Discord I think it has too many features, too many options for me. It's maybe the challenge. And I have a hard time figuring out kind of what does what. But that's getting really heavily used as well. Reddit, decent number there. Twitch, I don't think I've ever used Twitch in my entire life. I'm going to have to go look it up after this, seeing this, and try to figure out how to make use of it. It's started out kind of streaming video games, and I think it's moved now into streaming news and opinions and lots of other things as well. But there's a huge number of students on that. LinkedIn is honestly a little higher than I thought, especially for daily use. But I assume that probably some students have found out it's a really good location for networking and for job postings, things along those lines. The one that I honestly found the most surprising in this whole thing was Patreon. I wish we were in person to do just a raise of hands. How many people really know what Patreon is? I kind of had a general understanding before I started this, but had to kind of go look it up to see exactly what Patreon actually is. I guess it's a lot of different things depending on how you use it. But usually people on Patreon have like a YouTube channel, a TikTok channel, or Instagram influencers or something like that, and also have this Patreon. And it's essentially giving people that support them or that like them the chance to pay them money every month for the pleasure of either having additional access to some things for them or something along those lines. But usually it's at least 5, 10, 15, 20 bucks a month that you're spending to kind of get some additional access, some additional information, things like that. And I've never paid for Patreon in my life, and kind of was surprised that apparently 31% of students are daily, not only paying for it but using it. And then, I mean, again, on a weekly basis, 34% are on that, which implies that they're paying for it because there's very little you can access without paying for it. So just kind of a very interesting, I think, breakdown of kind of what's where students are and kind of where their brains are, what they're doing in their free time. And I think also really from a course development and such standpoint, I mean, are there ways we could use, I mean, Patreon's probably not a good example. Your university might not love it if you're charging students for content separately, but for Discord, I mean, like we're using in this space, is there an opportunity to use that or Twitch or something to actually kind of share some information? So getting to kind of student views of this a little bit, what percentage of online learners say they achieved a positive outcome as a result of their program? And there was a few things that were listed there. I gave the examples of a new job or promotion. I think salary increase, things along those lines were a few others that came out of this. Looks like we went with mostly 55%. A lot of people are saying that's maybe the number, second being 87, and then 22, 37 coming down below that. If we shift over, 87% in this particular study said that they achieved a positive outcome as a result of their online learning. And I think it's an important number to remember because you're actually going to see this number pop up again in a few minutes. I think it's correlated to one another, even though the survey didn't specifically draw the correlation there. But 87% is a pretty solid number of people that are coming out saying they had a positive outcome as a result of their program. And I think it's something, honestly, that if we're doing surveys, we have not quite gotten to the point yet at UCCS of doing student satisfaction surveys and that sort of thing. But I'd like to, in the next year or so, do that and actually ask this question and use it as a marketing tool, to be honest with you, or kind of put it on your website, because I think it's a powerful statement for our programs and kind of what we're doing, that many students are getting positive outcomes out of this, that they're able to say that they had a good experience. Positive view of online learning, 94% came back and said they had a positive view of online learning. And for one thing, I suspect that's dramatically up from just a few years ago before the pandemic, since so many people have now had that experience. But secondly, I think it's honestly pretty impressive and surprising. I mean, can you imagine a political issue out there today that you could get 94% of people to agree on? I mean, I think you would struggle if you said that, kittens are cute or something like that to get 94% of people to agree with that. So it's kind of an amazing statistic. 46% say they're likely to return to the same school for another program. And I think that really speaks to the need for, obviously, to have pathways from undergraduate to graduate and that sort of thing, but also for alternative credentials, for us to look for those opportunities out there that we could build that could bring students back. Because I mean, almost half of students are basically saying, yeah, I'm likely to come back and do this again. And then learning online again, 83%, not quite as high as the positive view, but obviously some people, I think, enjoyed the experience, kind of thought that it was a good experience, but also are, not really wanting to get another degree or that sort of thing. We probably, a lot of us have maybe had some of the same experience there of you've finished your last degree and think I'm kind of ready to not have to do this anymore, not have to spend quite so much time in the classroom, that sort of thing. Looking at just kind of student contact with instructors and engagement and what we're hearing from that side of things. This one quote I just thought was a good one, that professors being involved and willing to provide feedback is huge. Hit on this a little bit more, I think, throughout this, but we live in an age where you can learn almost anything without going to college. Between YouTube and Wikipedia and iTunes University and Twitch and TikTok. I mean, I'm going to admit that I'm on TikTok, and I follow a page that does Excel tricks. And it'll be a little 30-second video that just kind of shows you a trick with Excel. And there's been a few things I've watched on it and thought to myself, my goodness, if I'd known this 5 years ago, I could have saved myself hours of time or something along those lines. So I think that with that being out there, the access to so many different ways of learning, so many different opportunities, I mean, Duolingo, all those kind of things, trying to demonstrate our value is really increasingly important. And I think that when you look at what students say in these surveys, a lot of it comes down to the interaction with faculty and kind of the richness that comes from faculty contact and from engaged faculty who are providing good information. And so, I mean, 76% of online students said that they find optional virtual office hours attractive or very attractive. I will say, I mean, I'm sure those of you that have done virtual office hours, I would be willing to bet that you probably had maybe a couple students throughout the term, or maybe a few more depending on the subject or something. So I think sometimes there's kind of a disconnect between what people think would be a good idea and what they actually end up doing. It's kind of like if you were to survey everybody in the room and say, like, should you go to the gym more, or should you eat better? The answer would probably be overwhelmingly yes. If you were to look and see what we do for the next 2 months, it probably would not be quite matching with our aspirations. So I kind of imagine there's a little bit of that happens here. 27% said they believe more instructor contact would improve the quality of online courses. Smaller number there, but certainly something to kind of keep in mind that, that I think they are looking for that contact with the instructor. So if the program a student wants is not available in an online format, what are the odds of losing the student to another institution or them not attending at all? So 97% came out on top here, which is a pretty high number. Then 25, 63, a few people less, and then 12%. Let's see what we got here. So in this particular survey, they asked this twice. It's 2017 and 2022, and the number has climbed between those two times. So if you look at this, the kind of purple, the fuchsia, and the gray side of this is essentially saying that they're either not sure, probably would not, or definitely would not attend an on-campus program. And in 2017, it was about 44%, give or take, that are either saying they definitely would not, probably would not, or are not sure if they would attend it on campus. But there was a pretty decent number. I mean, if you kind of look at this, 56% or so were essentially saying, yeah, maybe I would go on campus. You flip to 2022, and this has gone up to 63%, and a much smaller, smaller guarantee that, or even strong likelihood that you're going to get them in an on-campus program. So it's not maybe quite the 97% we were thinking, but there's definitely a strong likelihood, a 63% chance or so, that if we don't have the program available, that we're not going to have that student. And there are reasons why, right, that we might not want to offer a program online. There are some programs that it's very difficult to offer online. Something especially like in the performing arts, dance, or something like that. It's probably difficult, I would imagine. I don't teach that, but I would think it's a very in-person kind of hands-on kind of experience. So there's some things we may say, this just isn't a good match. There are some things that we may say, for whatever reason, pedagogically, things like that, it's not a good match. But I think that it's important for us to keep in mind that increasingly, and I imagine if you survey this again in 3 or 4 years, you'll get an even higher number. Increasingly, you're either getting, one or the other. You're either getting, students that are going to come on campus, or students that are not going to come on campus. And, you're kind of making a decision when you decide not to offer the program online. You're making a decision that you're not going to have those students on, in the program. So something to keep in mind. I think this probably is not too surprising to everybody here, but overwhelmingly, flexibility is the name of the game. So when it comes to start dates, whether or not being on campus is required, the completion time, how quickly you can take, back-to-back courses, things like that. The flexibility in general, we got to be able to change courses or kind of adapt as you move through a program. The format, asynchronous, heavily is preferred. Just in general, people are looking for flexibility, and I would imagine this is probably not that much different than what most of us experience. I would think a lot of us probably work partially remotely, if not, in some cases fully remotely. I would be willing to bet that nearly everybody in the room has a Amazon account and expect things to kind of appear overnight on your doorstep. We've kind of increasingly as a society, I think, come to expect a lot of different flexibility in workplaces, in play places. I mean, just all these different experiences. And shopping or whatever, we kind of just expect to have the ability to, again, to order it online, walk in and return it in person. I mean, all those kinds of options. And students are expecting the same thing from us whenever it comes to these kinds of programs. They're looking for as much flexibility as they can get. David said he chose his PhD program because it was fully online, and I'm totally with you, David. I did my EDD fully online, and for that reason too, that I looked at some on-campus programs. I personally love a classroom. I enjoy kind of talking with other students and that sort of thing, but I'm also just at a point in my career where trying to be in one place at one time every week is very difficult to do. Or personal life as well, I guess. But just they're trying to say I'm going to be in one place at one time every week or every couple of weeks is very challenging. So I think that especially for adults, especially the older the person becomes, I mean, there's just a much better chance they're looking for that kind of flexibility that online would offer. Key factors in selecting an online program, I would be willing to bet this we can kind of almost guess at pretty well. The specific field of study is obviously incredibly important. 82% are saying that's kind of basically their first or they're ranking that as their first factor. Obviously, if you're trying to advance your career and you work in business, having a graduate program in nursing is probably not going to help you very much. So you're looking for something that's actually in the field that you're in, or if you're trying to switch for fields, you're trying to find something in that specific field as well. Tuition and fees, time to complete. There's an old adage, or I guess I say old, I guess it's maybe not that old since online programs are still relatively new, but there's for many years been the saying, that the two most important questions with online programs are how much and how long, because those are usually the questions you get asked over and over again by students. Just to be, I guess, honest and transparent from the UCCS perspective, we currently have about 37 different tuition tables for the institution, lots of different fees. It's extremely complex, extremely difficult to kind of navigate at the moment. And I've been advocating since I arrived to try to reduce this, especially for the online population. I would love to see it happen for the on-campus population as well, but at the end of the day, that's not really my job. So I've been focusing on kind of my part of it, but trying to encourage as much as possible that we look at ways of simplifying. CSU Global has done a spectacular job of this. If you go to their website, it's $350 per credit undergraduate, $500 I think per credit graduate, if I remember correctly, and there's no other fees. That's just kind of a flat rate. And I think that's increasingly, if you go to SNHU and Western Governors and those kind of things, you see increasingly that kind of an approach, because it just makes it so much easier for the students to understand it. I really don't think being the bargain basement leader is necessarily required. I think you have to be competitive, obviously, with institutions kind of in your class or in your region, that sort of thing. But I think students are sometimes willing to pay a little more, but they do want clarity. They want to be able to see kind of what the cost is and understand that. Time to complete is also very important. I think we don't probably focus on this enough sometimes, trying to make sure that it's clear, and that I know that at least I've struggled with this dealing with departments and things over the years, where sometimes like the course, we don't have enough to offer the course, and it's kind of, well, we're not going to offer it this semester. And it's kind of like, well, hold on. This may work well enough for somebody that's planning to be here for 4 years and kind of has time to come back to it. But with an online population, if somebody's coming in and only has 30 credits to complete, and now this course is not being offered, that can really dramatically shift their experience and kind of how long it takes them to get through the program. So important things to keep in mind as we build these and as we talk to students about them. Beyond that, obviously the reputation and ranking are somewhat important. I think it's kind of interesting that they say that the location being close, 33%, they're not that terribly concerned by that. But at the same time, that when we see the data that 80% of them are attending within about 100 miles, I suppose it depends on, first of all, what you define as close. Maybe they're thinking that if it's 50 miles away, it's not close. Maybe that close is, if it's within 10 miles or something along those lines. But I think the other thing is that there may be a level to which they're thinking about this just in terms of only the proximity of the institution, and not things like the alumni network and stuff like that, which are really, again, influenced, I think, by the location. So kind of things that would encourage somebody to maybe go somewhere a little bit closer, or in-state tuition. I mean, another thing that would, kind of encourage you to probably be a little bit closer as opposed to going across state lines. Family friend recommendation, not that important. Definitely kind of toward the bottom of the list here. I think that's kind of an interesting thing for us to consider. I think that there's a level to which word of mouth has some importance, but at least from what they're saying, that it wasn't a major factor in kind of how they selected their program. And then institutional loyalty, I think that maybe we've seen this in the past as more of a thing, with parents, kind of and children coming, to the same institution, and loyalty like that. But whenever they ask them if the program is not available in an online format at the school of their choice, what would you do, basically? And either enroll in a different program online at the same school. There's a few people who will do that. There's a slightly higher number that might come on campus, but the vast majority of them are bouncing or not enrolling at all. About 60 to 66%. And that kind of reflects before kind of the number that the chances that we're not going to enroll the student being around 63 or so, about the same ballpark in this particular question, that essentially they're kind of bouncing to somewhere else if it's not what they're looking for. There's a ton of talk right now with badging and with micro credentials and all these kinds of things. So I think it's interesting to see kind of what students think about this and kind of how open they are to it. So the survey asked basically just how open are you to some of these types of credentials. So trade certificate and or trade skills certificates, experience, things like that. About 30% said they're open to that. Industry certifications, Six Sigma, things along those lines, 23%. Higher ed credits but no degree is 20%, which I would honestly maybe have guessed a bit a little lower than that, because I guess it depends on what your kind of goal is, but it seems like there's sometimes not a huge outcome there. But then non-credit certificates, course options. So this is basically, micro credentials, badges, things along those lines. The relatively small number, 18%, are saying that they're interested in that, and then not open to any of these, 40%. I think that there's a level to which some of this is just the communication that's being done. Obviously, whenever you grow up, you hear about college, you hear about degrees, you don't hear about badges. Maybe it's maybe not something your parents talk about. It's not something that maybe your teachers have experienced in some cases and things like that. So I think that that's probably going to continue to go up a little bit over time. And especially as people start to see that in the workplace, maybe the degree is not quite as required as it was a few years ago, that non-credit area is probably going to start to increase a little bit as well. But right now, it's still maybe a little bit on the small side and maybe a little bit more of a sell, kind of a little bit more of a job to kind of explain to students kind of what the value is and what they can get out of it. Percent of online students believe their cost of their education was worth the cost. So it looks like we thought about half, give or take, or less than half. Very few went with 87%. Which is the number that they got in the survey. And I think I told you before that 87%, we were going to see this again. 87% said that they had a positive career outcome as a result of their personal career outcome as a result of their online learning. And then 87%, when asked if their online study was worth the cost, they said that either they agree or they strongly agree that it's worth the cost. And I really think that those two, like I said, the study that did it didn't actually directly really correlate the two as much, but I think that those numbers being the same is probably, I mean, if you got something out of it, if at the end of the day, you walked away and felt like you had a good experience and got a raise, whatever it might be, there's a pretty good chance you feel like that it was worth it. So a pretty high number there that are coming back with that. And I would again say, if you're, those of you who maybe are involved in surveying and things like that, it's a great question to ask students, because it's a great number to put on your website, right next to your cost or whatever area, to be able to say that, 87% of your students thought that it was worth the cost, as they completed their education. So which of the following classes, class activities and materials did the most online learners, 58% of them in this case, rate as very helpful? So we went with PowerPoint, video PowerPoint from the professor, then interactive media, quizzes, and then textbook and related materials kind of coming in fourth. So we got this one right. 48% or 58%, excuse me, said that videos, PowerPoint presentations from the professor were that they rated as very helpful, and the largest percentage in this particular question. And I think this reflects what I said before, that students are looking for that interaction and that experience and that knowledge and that connection with the faculty member. And they viewing them as an expert and somebody they can kind of learn from. We kind of went with interactive media next, which is a little further down, though not too terribly farther. But I think we would expect, hopefully, textbooks and related materials would be somewhat high up on this list. I think we maybe expect written assignments. I was a little surprised quizzes came out this high, because I've rarely had a student tell me that they just really loved quizzes. So I think that, at least to me, it was a little bit surprising that was quite as high of a number. I have personally always not been a fan of quizzes, because I kind of felt like that they were tricky. That there would be, especially like multiple choice questions, there would be kind of two that were pretty similar or something. So it's never been my favorite kind of type of assessment. I much prefer a written assignment where I had kind of more control over the experience. But I'm sure that also depends on your learning style. Discussion boards, we'll talk a little bit more about this in just a sec, but kind of on the lower end, not getting a lot of positive feedback. And I would love to hear, I mean, if anybody has thoughts on this in the chat or want to speak up and say anything. Videos from third parties came in pretty low in this. The synchronous sessions, I think, again, we can kind of look at some of the earlier data that, how many are actually kind of maybe attending those and stuff. or that sort of thing. Maybe that makes some level of sense, and I think it probably reflects maybe how many will actually show up to these in a lot of situations. But I was a little surprised the third-party videos, given that, again, so many of us, and at least I'm going to speak for myself, if I need to figure something out, the first thing I do is get onto YouTube and try to figure out, how to do it, whether it's, putting something together or, whatever, almost any topic. It's my very first stop almost on learning something new. And so for them to rate that on the lower side, I was a little surprised. The best thing I can guess is that maybe it's the videos we're choosing. Maybe we're choosing 60-minute videos that as opposed to the 3 minutes or things along those lines. And then David said it speaks to the teacher being seen as the expert, but I mean it definitely is the first thing you're seeing there. The information directly from the professor is kind of what they're getting the most value out of, and I think it does speak to that, like them being seen as the expert in the class and being seen as like what they're kind of paying the money to have the experience with. And then it's like G. Linda said, maybe they want one source, the professor. So I mean, maybe that's true as well. They're looking for one. I know that in the past, when we did online courses, we had a tendency to kind of just put up, before we had some of the bandwidth that we have today, we had a tendency to just put up maybe one video that was from YouTube or something, because we weren't having to put that on our own servers and to deliver it, and then a couple of articles. And I think that's obviously shifted, and you can kind of see that reflected here as well, where people are now looking more for a little more content from the instructor and kind of from us, the things that we're generating. So maybe that's a part of that as well. And then our moderator jumped in and said that as a part-time student, I agree. We want to know that the instructor knows their stuff, is able to articulate it. So yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. They're looking for that experience with the instructor as well. I think broadly speaking, one thing I've seen, and these are just kind of some comments that talk about this, but looking for variety, for not more than just kind of repetitive things happening in the classroom, and not having the same discussion post type assignment every week. I think you'll hear this a lot from students, and I think it's something we really need to try to take to heart. Discussion posts have become kind of standard within our instruction. It's for the very simple reason of regular and substantive interaction, which I would imagine most of you have heard at some point. I think that's largely why it's become such a big thing. But I really do think looking for ways to, have them submit photos or use voice thread or, different things along those lines of video responses are really things we need to look at, because I'm speaking from personal experience, doing about 3 years of writing and responding to a post every single week. It does get pretty exhausting after a while. But I think that, yeah, students are kind of looking for that, a little bit of variety in these types of assignments. So just kind of as we get to the close of this, some potential implications I thought that I would kind of share from what I got out of this, but I'd love to hear from you all too, like if there's kind of other implications you might see. There's growth in this field, which means opportunity, but I do think it's also if we work to capture it, because there is a lot of options these days. I mean, just this conference alone, you can see how many institutions are offering online options, largely in Colorado. I know we've got people from a few different places, but certainly there's a huge number of options out there for students. So even though there is kind of growth in that area, maybe a little more than there is on the traditional side right now, it's still something we're kind of going to need to fight and kind of work to be sure that we're providing strong experiences and pulling those students in. Careers still are major motivators, and I think we're probably going to continue to be more so. And I know we can have a lot of conversations about careers and about whether or not that's the right way, and whether or not we should learn for the sake of learning and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, kind of the market is what the market is. Here we are. And so I really think it does impact our marketing, our program design, our course design, and things of how do we be sure that we're providing those outcomes that students are looking for. The increasingly young population, I think, really does have a need for us to start to rethink support services and things like that. I think that the level of support you provide to somebody who's maybe 35 years old is a little bit different than what you should provide to a 22-year-old or a 20-year-old, or in some cases an 18-year-old that's in a fully online program. So just kind of some things to think about there. The alternative credentials, I mean, again, it's kind of still a small number, but that's increasingly attractive. So I think you're looking at what we're providing there is important. Flexibility, I really think in the future is going to be one of the major differentiators. Western Governors is an excellent example of this, where they have kind of really innovated a lot of different very flexible models for students that really let them move through programs very quickly. I've had a cousin who actually has gone through them and just absolutely was phenomenally impressed with what they did and the speed at which they could move through and kind of the flexibility that they provided. Having the program available again is really key. If we don't have it, there's a pretty good chance that we're losing that population. So I did put in, just as we kind of wrap up this, references for this so you can pull them up. Again, if you want to shoot me an email, and I've put my information there, or write me on LinkedIn or whatever, I'm happy to send you a link to that would just where you could download some of these without having to go through the fun of giving them your Wiley and everybody else your information. So I could share that over as well. But thanks everybody for listening. And I'm happy if everybody has questions or there's any discussion about this. I'd love to talk about it some. Let's see, Danielle. Discussion has to be relevant with content in which students benefit. I think you're definitely right. I mean, the type of discussion does have an impact. And I think that trying to train students to how to participate in discussion board is also a part of this, because, I think that, the kind of the old thing you see is that people, somebody will write 2 + 2 = 4 and everybody else says, oh, that's so smart. You did such a good job. I really agree with you. 2 + 2 does = 4, and that's kind of the entire list of it. So trying to kind of teach them or kind of give. I've seen some institutions that or some instructors that have assigned roles to different people to kind of be one person each week to be kind of a devil's advocate or things along those lines to kind of differentiate a little bit with discussion boards. Well, like I said, so they just gave me the flag for 5 minutes, so we're kind of coming to the end of this. I'll turn off the screen sharing, and would love to hear though if anybody has thoughts on this or any comments kind of on what you're doing. Does your data kind of look like this, or do you have a younger population, an older population? Is that is there a difference between kind of what you're seeing and what some of the data is showing here? Love to hear if anybody has any thoughts. And thanks, Danielle. It's a quiet group today. I think this was listed as a lurking session, so everybody's making use of that opportunity.
Absolutely. I'll interject real quick. Thank you a lot. Thanks a bunch, Nathan, for sharing it with us today, and for all the attendees for coming and hanging out with us. I'm about to post a survey in the chat right now. If you could just take a moment or two to fill that out for us and let us know your thoughts, we'd appreciate it. But hang out. I believe there's one more session before the wrap up this afternoon. And back to you, Nathan. If there are any questions for him, please let him rip.
I just saw where it's like Rachel asked if the studies included community college students, and yes, they did. I mean, the Chloe survey, for example, it just goes out to pretty much any chief online learning officer. So almost anybody can respond to that. There are definitely community colleges that respond there. Some of them, I mean, Wiley, for example, puts out quite a bit of data, and that's based on their OPM managed partnerships. So that it's definitely a selected group. And I don't know off the top of my head how many community colleges, like percentage wise, are on an OPM as opposed to others. I would guess it's probably a lower number, just because of the cost of like running an OPM partnership and things like that. But that's just a guess. I don't know that to be absolutely true. And then and I probably hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, but Gilinda, you're saying that like that people are tired of standard discussions. Yeah, I think you definitely, I mean, I don't think you have to talk very often to an online student population to get that impression. I know I hear it on a pretty regular basis. So I definitely think working with people like you on this group, instructional designers and things like that, to try to look at ways of making it a little more broad and things. And then you're probably right that like the term that's getting used, it may depend on, because voice thread or something like that, maybe there may be a different response rate if you get if you do something like that instead of just discussion boards in general. Anybody else before we come to the close? Thoughts, implications?
Was on this time. I just didn't know how to do it. Okay.
There's a question from Ruth in the chat. Are the studies available?
Yeah, so the studies, if you download the PowerPoint off of the Discord, I forget what it's called, but the materials channel on the Discord, I've got a reference page at the end of it that does kind of go through all of the studies. But if you want to shoot me an email, I can also just send you a link to where you can download them, because it's probably easier than going through and getting them one by one.
Looks like they're in the presenter slides on Discord.
Okay, they are. Okay. And then definitely the first. I just saw the stuff on the right, so yeah, that was perfect.
Gloria asked if seeing any indicators that higher ed is promoting micro-credentials effectively. I think it's still a bit of a mess right now. I mean, there are some places out there that are doing really well with it. Boot camps in particular, I think, have done, there's been some places that have been really done really effective jobs with coding boot camps, things along those lines. It does seem like it's still a bit of a hot mess, though, just I think across the industry right now. What's happening with micro-credentials and badging. I think that it depends to some degree, I think, on the institution and kind of how well you really invest in it and how well you really lean into it. Was at Rutgers some years back, and they really were, this was some years ago, like, kind of before badging was quite so hot as it is today. This is at least 7 or 8 years ago. And they were leaning pretty heavily into it, and we're having some success with it as a result. But I think it does take a pretty concentrated, heavy approach to it. It's just kind of tossing a few out there doesn't necessarily work. I think you really have to kind of have some people there to focus on it, have to do some marketing, that sort of thing. And that's where I think a lot of institutions probably just don't have the resources or aren't ready to commit it or something like that. That kind of makes it a little harder for them to really get off the ground. I do think that things like Stackable and things like that, pairing them with degree programs helps a lot. I think you've seen places be pretty successful when they've done that, but that's a lot more work than just offering it. I will point out Boulder. I work for UCCS, but we have virtually no connection to Boulder, so I make $0 off of this or anything. But Boulder is doing a micro credentials conference. I think it's late July, if I remember correctly. That you might Google if you do UC Boulder and micro credentials. I think it should pop up. But they're doing kind of a badging and micro credentials conference later this summer. That's, I think, only about $50 or $60 if I remember correctly. It overlaps with something else for me, so I'm not able to go to it. But I think we've got 1 or 2 staff members that are going. But just kind of an FYI, it's something that if you're interested in the topic, they're doing, I think it's about a 2-day conference there. So something worth considering. Well, I guess we can wrap up if nobody else has got anything, but thanks everybody for joining and listening in.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciated your analogy on the discussion, the 2 + 2 = 4. Again, in my student perspective, I understand you have to make it a requirement in order to get people to participate, but it always just seems so forced. It's like they're just meeting the requirement of getting the grade, and that's it.
Well, especially the responses. I think, like I said, I listened in one session some while back where this instructor was assigning on each one of their each week a student in a different role, and she had a list of about 7 or 8 of them that she was using and kind of telling them like to respond from this perspective or something. Sure. So either to ask for more information or to kind of like criticize it or whatever. Yeah. And she had said she'd had a lot of success with that because it kind of gave them like a direction to go in.
Yeah, and that's I had an instructor do something similar where one person would say the typical format is everyone posts and then you have to reply to two of your classmates discussions. And it's just always a quick short, like, hey, that's great, I agree. And to have, I had, like I said, a similar instructor who took one where, one student posted the discussion and everyone else's job was to respond and actually have a conversation based off of that one and not just say, yeah, I agree or I don't agree and just meet the minimum requirement. But it can be utilized, but it just isn't that often. So anyway,
Well, thanks very much for your help moderating.
yeah,
this.
absolutely. Yeah. Good work. And I think we're probably done here. So have a good rest of your day. We'll see you around maybe.
Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a good day.